I'm an avid reader, but reading in a foreign language is difficult. When you're interested in something, then you want to understand it. I can also do something else, which is revolutionary by any stretch of the imagination. It hits the sweet spot between learning and pleasure.
Right, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Luca Lampariello. Luca, you've been doing this for longer than I have, and you were one of my very sort of first references when I first started making stuff online. So it's great to talk. You've been on the podcast a number of times over the years, and here we are in 2026.
Thank you for having me, Ollie. Always nice to see you. Yeah, 2026. It's an exciting year for everybody. I think we live in a time where you can learn any language even better and more easily than before. So if you know how to do it, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to get right into that. First of all, as it is 2026, and we've got new people becoming interested in languages all the time, there are people who perhaps don't know who you are. So maybe you could give us a little overview of Luca.
Yeah, I'm an Italian guy, and I've been learning foreign languages for as long as I remember. Actually, it's been 34 years. I started when I was 10, and now I have something called Smart Language Learning Academy. So I basically, in this academy, this online school, we help people fulfill their potential when it comes to learning foreign languages, because I'm convinced that anybody can learn any foreign language, provided that they know how to do it. So I have also, apart from a passion in language learning, I also love teaching and in general education, because I think education empowers people to fulfill their potential. A lot of people do not know that they have a huge potential when it comes to learning. They think that everything is fixed, that whether you were born with a language gene or you're bitten by the polyglot bug, as they say, or not, it depends on nature. Well, I think it's mainly nurture. So if you know how to leverage the immense power that we have within our skull, then we can accomplish anything. And I've been doing this I've been teaching, I've been working as a teacher and coach over the last 15 years. And now, once again, we teach people in the school. We have courses, we have also workshops, master classes. We have a lot of things going on. And it's a pleasure for me to be able to, help people learn foreign languages in a better way, or in an easy, I don't know whether it's easy, but an efficient way for sure.
Yeah, there's no free lunch with language learning, is there?
You can have the best tools in the world. You can have the best method. So you still have to put in the work.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I've always admired about you. You've always been really interested in the teaching side of things, and it's always been obvious to me. I mean, I have a background in linguistics, and it's always very obvious to me when people have been doing their own reading on the topic, because there's certain kind of vocabulary and certain concepts that you learn in more the academic side of linguistics that otherwise you'd have absolutely no idea about. And I always really appreciate how you think about language learning. Let's go back to what we talked about something you said a few minutes ago, which was that 2026 is a exciting time to be learning languages. I'd love to hear why you think that, and maybe you could contrast that with what things were like 10 years ago, 20 years, or even 30 years ago, and why now is so exciting.
Well, first of all, I think it's exciting because the tools are getting better and better. I think that the most important thing to stress is the fact that the human being remains at the center of good, efficient learning. But if we learn how to use the power of our imagination combined with the power of AI tools, then anything can happen. Let me give you a very concrete example of what is happening in my life as a language learner. As of now, I started, I had a kind of a shock back in the day, 14 years ago, when I tried to learn Japanese, because I chose the wrong materials. I was applying the wrong method, and I did not have these amazing translation tools and AI tools in general that we have nowadays. So what happened is that basically when I got this material that I did not like that much, but it was even difficult to go through it because I didn't understand it. It was back in the day, for example, I downloaded a lot of podcasts from Link. Stephen Kaufman has been managing this website for a long time. And when I did that with Chinese, no problem at all. I chopped the text into Google Translate, gave me relatively decent translation into English or Italian, but Japanese, it didn't cut it, because Japanese is an SOV language, completely different structure. Even you learn Japanese yourself. So, it's a different world. The translation was not good. I did not understand the text. I had to ask my colleague Luca to help me. I still remember we were walking in Berlin. That was 2011. And he was painstakingly going through the text and helping me with that. And nowadays, I can not only understand anything in detail, I can ask AI, and I've done that, to create a story of myself going to Japan. So this has been happening over the last 10 days, so from the beginning of the year. And basically, it's a story about me. So it's highly personalized. And I gave it the right prompt. So I've been doing some prompt engineering so that the AI, Google AI Studio in this case, would give me not only a story about me, but a story of unfolding, of me in Japan. I divide it into packages of, like, for example, batches of 5 dialogues, and each batch of 5 dialogues relates to a specific scene. So it's like a movie in a way that is highly personalized. It's about me. I can create the text, the audio, which sounds great, and all for free, because with Google AI Studio, you can do that very easily. And that's a game changer. And when it comes to, for example, podcasts, I can create, I've already done that. I've created podcasts. I can show you here. I've created podcasts that are highly personalized because, once again, these are podcasts about topics I love. So, for example, there's some YouTube videos I like. I chuck them into Notebook LM, and I decide the length of the podcast, I decide the style, and then I have podcasts that are highly personalized. Now, I always say, Trump, not Trump.
Where's this conversation going?
And it's like, Trump interests all. No, it's interest trumps all. What's important stress is not Trump. Yeah, it's conversation is going about. No, we're not going to talk about Trump. So interest trumps all, in the sense that when you're interested in something, whether it's something you find or something you create, then you want to understand it. And that is the main point. That's the reason why this is exciting for me. I've been applying this for Turkish, the same thing. And I've been having a blast over the last 4 months. On top of that, it's exciting personally for me because my work has kind of changed a little bit. There's been big changes with AI. The landscape is changing. People want more interaction with human beings on top of AI tools. So I went back to teaching to a large crowd of students within short workshops. And the thing that has changed for me is, apart from these AI tools that make the language learning very personalized, is the fact that I am learning within a community. So I'm excited about learning because then I post my own learning session. We call it WODs, workout of the day, or language workout of the day, within certain programs that we're running. And you see people doing the same thing, and we share ideas. So my students have incredible ideas about, I like this, but let's tweak it a little bit. They're testing their own things. So it's imagination, the power of imagination, AI tools, and accountability within a group learning that is really making a difference in my life as a learner, and also in the life of the students of the academy. So that's why it's exciting. And the other thing that I wanted to add is that you said it correctly. You hit the nail on the head when you say, I'm really a passionate learner, meaning I like learning how the brain works. And with AI, not only with AI, but I do extensive research to provide the best possible service to my students and also to myself. Ultimately, as a language learner, I'm also going deep into research, neuroscience, second language acquisition, and I have the privilege and luxury of being able to apply it to myself and also show that to my students, and they apply it in their own way, and I learn from them. A teacher is first and foremost a learner. So all this is super exciting for me. I'm learning Turkish and Japanese at the same time, 2 SOV languages. So that's a big thing. And I think it's going to get even more exciting in the coming weeks and the coming months, because AI changes so fast that you discover new things, new tools, you apply them, et cetera, et cetera. It's not only AI, of course, but AI really makes things exciting if you know how to use it.
Yeah. For the benefit of people listening, SOV meaning subject, object, verb, language. Perhaps you could explain just briefly what makes that particularly challenging for English speakers.
So not only for English speakers, for myself as well as in Italian, it's very similar in the sense that it has a subject, a verb, object structure, right? I'm eating an apple, for example, but in Japanese that would be I an apple eating. But that gets more complicated than that when you add, for example, a secondary clauses, meaning I think that Japan is a beautiful country. So you have to say Japan, beautiful country, verb, to, which is a particle, omoimasu, I think, which basically let's put it this way, skyrockets the cognitive load that your working memory has to face when it comes to forming sentences. It's already difficult to grab words from your long-term memory and try to string them together, right? You put them together to string a sentence. But then what happens is that if you don't know how to do it, you're thinking about the words, you're thinking about the order, you have to rearrange all these words, and then you have to say the sentence. And that, from a cognitive load standpoint, is a disaster. And that's exactly what I was doing before 14 years ago. When I started having a conversation with my tutor cycle, it took me 20 or 30 seconds to string a sentence together. And then I was exhausted after that. And I said, okay, well, this is not working. And then I gave up. And now I'm back with a vengeance, knowing that you need a different approach. So now, just to give an example, I started 11 days ago, right? And I'm already taking chunks of language and forming and, putting them together to form different sentences. But I keep them short because the longer the sentence, the higher the cognitive load, right? So just an example, study, right? I found studying, I extracted benkyu suru no wa, which is, benkyu suru no wa, studying a language, right? And then I change, like, eigo benkyu suru no wa, so learning English, and then I can say, muzukashii desu, is difficult. Now this comes naturally now, but 14 years ago was extremely difficult. So that's why I think that, experience counts because 14 years ago, I did the wrong things. Now that I have more experience and with the entire community behind, things are different and I'm having fun. It's very rewarding.
By the way, if you're enjoying this interview, then you will love the free guide that I have put together with all of the best language tips from today's guest. We put all of the insights from the interview into a handy one-page PDF that you can refer to whenever you want. To grab it for free, you can scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching on video, or else click the link in the description. There are so many different... First of all, thank you for explaining all of that. It's absolutely fascinating to hear how you've been using it. And in a way, you're using the most extreme case to prove the point, right? Because of all the particular challenges with a language like Japanese, what you've explained is how much of a difference the material itself makes. I wonder, is that the same for other languages? So if someone is learning a language that's much closer to their native language, have you found that AI has been just as useful, or does it become more of a kind of relative? What am I trying to say? Well, maybe I'll just ask you like that. I mean, how has AI become useful in more straightforward language learning cases?
Well, I would say that it's independent. It's language independent in the sense that whether you're learning as a native English speaker, whether you're learning French or Japanese, at the end of the day, what really counts, what the main difference is, still, again, what really counts to me, is the individual. The AI just enhances the learning process. But first of all, you have to go to the basics, and you have to make sure that you align what I call three main elements. Now, Susan Kruger is a psychologist who back in the day coined this language. Well, it's not language, actually. It's general, just applies to any skill, which is the success spirit. Basically, she claims that, and I wholeheartedly agree, that you need to align three things. First of all, you need to align your organization skills, meaning, when to find the time, because this is a big thing. In school, they teach you, and poorly at that, they teach you how to learn languages, quote unquote, but they don't talk about neither the mindset nor the organizational sides of things. These you have to align. Actually, mindset and organization come before we even address the learning how to learn thing. So you need to get organized, meaning you have to learn the principles of good organization, find the time versus, having the time, um, reducing the friction of actually sitting down and doing things, having the materials ready, knowing already what to do. The mindset is another huge thing. Carol Dweck talks about this. Carol Dweck wrote a very interesting book called Mindset that affects everything. And then you have to learning how to learn. On top of that, you have the AI tools. If you have these three, and then whether you're learning French or Japanese, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, what counts is that you sit down and you learn in a way that appeals to you. If you're learning French, of course, it's slightly different than if you're learning Japanese, because Japanese has the extra complexity of kanji, that is Japanese characters like Chinese. So for example, if you want to make something comprehensible, you need to make sure that you give AI certain prompts so that it gives you, for example, let me see if I can show you this. So you have a visual example of what this means. So these are like Luca in Japan, dialogue 1.5. You should be able to see that. Yeah. And you have just the text that I marked that is in Japanese. Now, this for a beginner or for a false beginner is not comprehensible, because yes, maybe you can read the hiragana, but you cannot read the kanji. But what you can do is that you can design prompts so that every line comes also with the romanji, which is the transliteration, and comes with, you should be able to see that, a word by word translation. So you not only have the translation into plain English, but you also have the word by word translation, meaning you have the overall sentence, meaning at a sentence level, and you have the translation at a lexical or word level, which is extremely important. This stuff, you don't need to do it for French, because it's really straightforward. You have the same structure, et cetera, et cetera. But this just to tell you that the concept, the principle is the same. Interest trumps all, and make it comprehensible, and make the content rich. Rich means that it contains at least 20 or 30% of content, words that you don't know, and you consume that, and then you keep acquiring the language. Of course, you also have to know how to consume it. Listen and read, just listen, compare, et cetera, et cetera. But where AI makes a difference is that nowadays, on top of the language material that creators, great language learning material that creators provide, I'm not saying, by the way, not to use it, but use both, you can also create content that is highly tailored to you, according to the prompts you can create using the power of your human imagination. And that is what my students and I have been doing. And it's a total game changer, because it's this plus that. It's interesting material that you find and interesting material that you create that is tailored to you. You know?
I was thinking about this in a conversation I had earlier today, where thanks to the internet, one of the big things that we were given was unlimited content. You could now find unlimited written content, audio content, video content. And that's fantastic. Again, you have to learn how to use it. You have to learn how, there is such a thing as too much content, paradox of choice and all of that. And it seems like when you have all this limitless content, what you still really need, what's missing from that equation, is personalization. You would still have to go to a teacher to get that, or a human being to get that personalized. And the fascinating thing that AI has done is it's given you personalized, it's combined those two things, and it's given you the content that's available freely on the internet, plus the personalization that you would expect from a teacher, so that you now get, as you said, the content that you want personalized in a way that you want it. It's almost like, it's almost like you find a podcast that you're interested in, you get the transcript straight away, you take it to a lesson with your teacher and ask them to explain every single thing. But with AI, you can just do all of that at the touch of a button. And it is, when we think about the truly kind of game-changing moments in technology, there's not that many of them, but this really does create new possibilities, or else, at the very least, an incredible leap in efficiency. And that's before we haven't even talked about chatbots, right? And how you can now practice speaking without the need to pay $50 an hour every time for a teacher, which, again, not to diminish that at all, but it has a time and a place. So it does seem to me that it's created a whole bunch of new, like a massive increase in efficiency of learning?
Absolutely. I just wanted to add a couple of more things, if I may. The first one is that nowadays with Notebook LM, if you've been using it, you can also use things like infographics, an infographic, and then you can describe. For example, this is the entire content of a podcast in Turkish, where you have, for example, here, this is like how to get out of the dopamine rut, and then it gives you the steps. So I can, for example, take this, and in conjunction with my phone, for example, I can activate, say, ChatGPT, and I can discuss it. So just to give an example here, I can activate it. Literally, this is ChatGPT 2.5. Hey, ChatGPT, how's it going? If you can hear me.
Hey there. I can definitely hear you loud and clear. I'm doing well and ready to help out. How's everything going on your end?
You sound very reassuring. So now I'm going to describe an image that I have here, which is the image of a podcast. I'm going to do this in Turkish. Can you help me with that?
Absolutely. Feel free to describe the image in Turkish and I'll help you out.
Okay, so just to give an example, what you can literally do with two things. I just printed this, and this is by the way, it's a podcast that I also have. So I've gone through the podcast and I can do so many things with this. So it's just amazing. Going back to one interesting thing that you said before that I wanted to touch upon is the fact that 20 years ago or 30 years ago, there was a dearth of material, meaning there was like a lack of content. Now we have too much and we run to the paradox of choice. However, to me, it's better to have more rather than less. But it's important to learn. This is another skill that people should develop during, this amazing era, is the fact of focusing on one, maybe two resources at the time. So that, yes, I've created these downloads for Japanese. Now let me go through that, consume this, and then move on to the next thing, because we have the shiny object syndrome, of which a lot of people crap, and everybody wants, I want the new tool, and then I want to use this, and then I want to download that, and then they end up using these jack of all trades, master of none, as they say, using everything and nothing at once. So the thing is, for Turkish, I've been focusing on these Notebook LM created podcasts for like 3 months. Then I'm going to move on to the next thing. But it's important, once again, to use the wealth of materials we have, but being able to focus on a few things, a few tools at a time, and trying to avoid falling into the trap of the shiny object syndrome stuff, where you just chase everything and then chase rabbits, you ain't gonna get none, as they would say.
Yeah, and this is really, when I find people talking about the options for learning with AI, the place where my mind goes to straight away is that with all of these options, for the average person that's not trained in this stuff, or who doesn't have perhaps a great deal of experience or discipline with learning, it really doesn't necessarily add any benefit, does it? Because you've got to know how to. It's the same problem as when you walk into a language learner's house and they've got 30 textbooks on the wall, but they haven't actually been through any of them, kind of hoarding material and collecting material. You'd often find the person who just bought one textbook and went through it 5 times is probably going to be much further ahead, because they've just read the same novel 3 times, or even watched Friends 5 times back to back. Through focus and repetition, they're probably going to come out ahead. So this is clearly what you focus on teaching people in your academy. But how do you think about the challenge, the kind of meta learning challenge, or the meta challenge of, for the average language learner, to learn to use these incredible things that you've talked about here with AI, but to also bake it into their learning process in a productive way, without just becoming a permanent victim to shiny object syndrome?
Well, it's an excellent question. In fact, one of the main problems at the very beginning is this learning curve. And some people, especially those who are like maybe in their 60s or their 70s, they experience this kind of, first obstacle of having to learn that on top of figuring out how to learn a language. It might be discouraging, because they say, okay, you're teaching me to learn a language, and on top of that, I have to use all these tools. This is something that my colleagues and my team and I have encountered. And people say, oh, this is a little bit overwhelming. That is the reason why we always say, bear with us, just invest maybe a week with us, because they see how we do it. And we also create, for example, ad hoc videos to explain. And what we've discovered is that once people realize how to do that, they get super excited about it.
Yeah.
But you're perfectly right in saying that back in the day, we had a dearth of material. But what I did, for example, 30 years ago, since I had only that one material, I went through it multiple times and I ended up knowing this and learning. You can learn a lot from one language learning material if you use it well. The problem is that people want to also novelty on top of repetition. So we teach them the power of, we train them in figuring out one AI tool, two AI tools at a time. And then you move on to, hey, keep using the language learning material and keep it simple. Like in everything in life, I always say simplicity is key. When we have too much and we want to try too many things, then, normally it doesn't go well. But if you learn to use one tool at a time and you do one or two activities and then you move on to the next stage, then normally that's what happens. And people learn and then they move on to the next one, just next tool and next stage. But you're perfectly right in pointing that out, that some people are around because they say, okay, well, I have to.
I mean, I do. I experience that myself, but then I'm not very disciplined. So that's probably why. Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? I mean, it reminds me that this is why, because at the core of my language learning has always been reading, and it is reading, whether it's reading graded readers or native level novels or whatever it is. One of the reasons it's so powerful is because it slows you down, allows you to focus, and it gives you access to the whole language in the contents of the page. It's incredibly powerful. And yet, when I went about building StoryLearning, one of the things I very quickly realized is that you can give people all this great reading material that's at their level, but even then, the meta skill of using it well is actually too difficult for most people. Developing the skills of reading for gist, for example, of not getting frustrated when there's vocabulary that you don't understand, of reading and then rereading multiple times without worrying about being bored or without needing novelty. Those are such difficult meta skills for people that when I thought about, well, how do I take reading as a powerful skill, but then actually develop a system for teaching that? That's why I ended up building my StoryLearning courses in a way that are actually really quite step by step. Like step 1, do this; step 2, step 3, do this, because it's the most reliable way of bringing people along on a journey. And for people who get home from work and they're tired, they don't have the energy to start to sit and think about the learning process. They really just got to want something to follow. And I feel like that's a really interesting problem for us as educators. It's taking what we know to be true and then figuring out how to make it digestible for people who aren't coming at it from the same perspective. And don't forget to download your free guide with all of the language tips from today's guest. You can scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching on video, or else click the link in the description.
Well, it's just like what people need and what people want. And then you have to align what people need, and you have to make sure that you get them into the process without them knowing almost that is the right process. Let me give you an example. When it comes to reading, reading is one of the most powerful things you can do, because in language learning and in life, I always say life first, language learning later. And I'm an avid reader. I've been reading hundreds of books over all my life, and I'm very happy that my parents, just conveyed this and transmitted this passion for reading. But reading in a foreign language is objectively difficult for a number of reasons. First of all, because of the books in general you can create and craft the books like graded readers so that it kind of simplifies the content and the vocabulary. But books contain the infamous low frequency vocabulary that you don't encounter in real life. That is why it's difficult to read. Now, the other interesting thing about reading is that, unfortunately, as Professor Wells is a famous polyglot, for those who don't know, just look him up. He's got a famous speech that he gave, I think, in Serbia about reading literature. You have to understand 98% of every page if you want to read it extensively, meaning if you want to read for the pleasure of it. Now, what happens is that, as you were pointing out, people are, they're kind of impatient. Then they come back after 9 hours or 8 hours of work, and they don't want to get into the, how do I do this? This is complicated. So there's a lot of obstacles, because before you start reading extensively, it takes a lot of reading. So what I always say is that start with one page. You start with 1 page a day. We call it the 1-page challenge. And then you can also use, once again, all these amazing tools. I've been doing this over the last year. I started reading books finally Polish. Now, I think I speak fluent Polish or Polish fluently because I had a girlfriend for many years and we were just speaking in Polish. But I was shocked when I started reading a book in Polish. I said, okay, well, I find it really difficult, even if I'm fully functional. And so what I started doing is I started reading a book on Kindle. This was a novel, it's called I don't remember, Apocalypse Z. It's a zombie, apocalyptic novel. Actually, it's a trilogy. And I started scanning the pages. So I have Google Lens. I scan the page. I listen to it in Italian while I read it directly in Polish. And that allows me to understand immediately. Because when you listen to it in your native language, you conjure up images. And then I just clicked and highlighted the words that I did not know. This really made it way easier. It's not like reading extensively, of course. You have to scan the page and you have to listen. So it's slower, but it hits the sweet spot between learning and pleasure. It's 70% pleasure, for a read for pleasure, because I'm really interested in that, but also it's 30% of learning because it allows me to discover new words. Without that Google Lens, it was discouraging because I understood the gist, but I did not understand the details, right? I understood 92%. I ran this experiment over 20 pages. I said 92%, I understand 92%.
And it's still not enough.
Not enough. Yeah. And so I was using Google Lens. It filled in the gap. It was amazingly useful. And now that I've been reading more and more in Polish, it's getting better because you need a lot of, as always, you need to read a lot before you start developing the capacity of reading for the pure pleasure of it, which is called extensive. And that's why I call it semi-extensive or semi-extensive reading until, fake it until you make it. But in this case, it's just literally using Google Lens to facilitate the act of understanding books that I genuinely like. This is one other example of how AI tools or, translation tools have changed or can revolutionize your language learning, provided that you have the foundation, meaning you do one thing at a time. You focus on one thing. In that case, it was page, 2 pages, 3 pages, instead of trying to do everything at once.
I suppose what's interesting about the examples you're giving here is that, in a way, a lot of what you're putting your effort into with technology is problem solving, isn't it? It's taking materials that could be good if they weren't quite so hard, and you're just you're using it to remove that particular problem. And it's almost like a quest to create the ideal material. Because let's pretend that, let's imagine that Polish book you were trying to read had been written at a level that was for, I don't know, young adults rather than for full adults. And so it was 10%, 15% easier. The language was, say, 10, 15% simpler. In all likelihood, you would have picked up that book, read it, and it would have been at the perfect level, and you could have just read that book without the need for Google Lens or anything like that. And so what AI is doing is actually creating the possibility to give you the ideal material from the beginning, which allows you to then do your thing without the need to find workarounds or, reading digitally so you can look up words and all these things, which are basically just trying to get obstacles out of your way, right?
Exactly. Well, there's 2 things to say here. The first one is that just to give an example, I could take that book, the World War Z book. No, it's not World War Z. It's the
zombie apocalypse.
I could do 2 things. The first one is to continue reading the book and do the usual stuff. It's slightly different. It's slightly difficult, more difficult. It's called a Goldilocks zone. But once again, interest trumps all. I'm so interested in it, then even if there's a cognitive load of having to do the listening to it in time, etc., I will still do it because I'm interested, but I have to break it down into smaller steps. However, I can also do something else, which is revolutionary by any stretch of the imagination, which is to take the PDF of the book and just to give it to AI to simplify it and creating a graded reader that is at my level. So in other words, the entire book or chapter by chapter, I can give it to AI and say, this is a C2 level, make this book, keep the content, but you can give it a very specialized prompt to simplify the content and maybe shorten it so that you can have your own simplified version of the content, and then you will consume later when you have a higher level. And this obviously changes everything, because you always find you're in a situation that is ideal for you, doing things that are relatively simple within your level and that are fun and with content that you like. And then you can move on to the next. And even when you move on to the next stage, you also have AI that can help you fill in the gaps. You can scan a page and have AI comment on the fly and literally explaining the grammar points, etc.
Yeah.
So we live in that's why I say 2026 is exciting.
Two technical questions for you. Firstly, how do you find the PDFs for books? And then second, in a legal way, if that's possible.
Right.
If that's possible. And let's assume you've bought the book. You paid money for the book. And how do you actually, on a technical level, get text that can be used and manipulated, such as a PDF? And then the second question is, how have you found AI to be on grading? So if you say, look, rewrite this for me at a B2 level, how have you found it able to do that?
Oh, for the first question, well, there's many ways you can download PDFs from the internet. You can even, I think you can buy them on, I use a Kindle, so you can directly buy them on Amazon as a Kindle, and I use a Kindle. And then, you can also find websites where you can download the PDFs, as I said. And once you have the PDF, you can just chuck it into Gemini or ChatGPT. But I think Gemini now, it's even better. And then you give them, I've built a prompt to do that. So you need to, once again, have the patience. You can't just type, simplify this book, because it doesn't work this way. You have to iterate. You have to make sure that you give the instructions, so you get a result. Oh, I don't like it that much. I want you to do this and that. So I've taken the time to create the ideal prompt. But the beauty of it is that once you have it, you can apply it to anything. So, and I found it's cool, because you can give it exactly the things you want. Let me give you an example. You have a chapter of this book that is 15 pages. You can say, okay, just simplify it to 5 pages and use, for example, mid-frequency, just mid-frequency or high-frequency terms. Of course, you also have to feed this information. Pollination is a leading figure in this regard. I've downloaded the book. Pollination wrote How to Learn Vocabulary in a Foreign Language. And the AI has everything it needs to have in order to create simplified content for you based on the kind of vocabulary. Because at the end of the day, reading is about vocabulary. It's mainly building your vocabulary. So, and it simplified it, doing a great job. Well, of course, with time, you have to give it, you will understand what AI is failing at. And you say, okay, well, keep the context, keep the characters, keep this, change the tone. It's just mind-blowing what you can do. And I've been experimenting with this for over the last 6 months, and it completely changed everything I do from at any level. Japanese level as a false beginner with stories about me going to Japan, which is going to happen, by the way, to the intermediate level with Turkish, creating the podcast I want, plus infographic, etc. And at an advanced level, I'm creating, both graded readers, and I keep reading books that I like through Google AI Lens. What do you call it? Google AI Lens? AI Lens? I don't remember.
It's changing every 5 minutes, isn't it? The name of these tools.
Exactly. Now I don't remember. It's Google AI. Google Lens. It's called
Google Lens, I think it is. Yeah. Luca, you are, or at least have been, well known for your bidirectional translation approach. How has that changed, if at all, with the advent of AI?
Fundamentally, once again, the principles don't change. The learning principles are always the same, because at the end of the day, the language learning happens in our brain. What has changed is the fact that nowadays, so the bidirectional translation is a method that you apply to a certain kind of material. What has changed, there's 2 things. The first one is the what. So I'm now creating my own material, which once again, interest trumps soul, meaning I'm applying the bidirectional translation to something that I really, really like. Because assimil, which is normally the kind of material that I use, that has like the text in my target language, the other text in my native language, is great to start, but it gets boring really quickly. So, but I can create my own assimil, right? So that in that regard, this has really changed. Going back to the point I was talking about before, And as far as the bidirectional translation itself, that hasn't changed much. But what you can do nowadays is that you can even have AI to assist you in the translation. For example, I can orally translate something that I see in front of me with Asimil or material that I've created, and I can have AI give me some pointers on what I'm doing right or what I'm doing wrong. But the method itself hasn't changed. The learning principles are the same. What really has changed is the material I apply the technique to, which is now highly tailored to me and personalized. And it's fun. Everything sticks because I see, literally, I see myself in Japan talking to people. I'm applying this now to Japanese. Though what changes is the interest, it's the emotional part of it. The fact that I always say that language learning is, yes, an intellectual pursuit, but it's first and foremost an emotional adventure. It's full of doubts. You doubt yourself, whether you can actually learn or not. But if you can include emotions in your learning process, whether it's because these emotions are embedded in stories, or whether you have AI talking to AI that removes the fear of speaking with a human being and reassures you. These are all aspects that are really important and add, to your capacity of acquiring language better and faster at the end of the day.
So I've got through about 10% of the things that I wanted to talk about with you. But such is the fascination with AI that this has been. I wanted to stick with it because it's absolutely fascinating hearing everything you're doing. So we're going to have to continue this another time. Where can people go to find out more about you and your academy and everything else?
So they can go to lucalampariello.com, which is where everything is the central hub where the people can sign up to courses, workshops, and everything else. And also, if they type Luca Lampariello on YouTube, they'll find my YouTube channel. So these are the two main channels: my website and my YouTube channel.
Fantastic. Okay, man. Thank you so much, and we will speak again.
You're most welcome, Oli. Thank you for having me. Ciao.